Welcome to the Books and Beer Book Club, coming to you from Cercis Brewing Company in Columbus, Wisconsin. We're a different kind of book club, only reading books by authors who can visit us in person or via Zoom for the discussion. We've been going strong since 2015, meeting nearly every month. We're now making these fun and informative discussions available to you on video. I'm your host, Valerie Beal. I'm an author myself, and I enjoy interviewing our guest authors and facilitating the questions from our readers both in person and on Zoom. We hope you enjoy this replay. To join us live, please check out our schedule on our Facebook page at Books and Beer Columbus.
Welcome. And
Thank you for having me.
so how we work here a little bit is that our readers will put books forward that they've read. And so Pete and Nitska over here, which there you can see them. We're traveling in the place called Wharton in your book, and that's where they picked up a copy of your book.
Oh,
and
great.
then brought it back. Yeah, they brought it back to us for consideration. So who was it? Someone signed the book?
The woman who owns Grunkies. Okay.
The woman who owns Grunkies?
Oh, yeah.
Somebody who is a character in your book
Yeah.
signed their book for them. So
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I was just in Bayfield. Well, it was last fall now, and I did a big reading there, and I hadn't been in Grunkies for a while, and I walked in and they had a big poster of the book, and it was cool. So
you're a star.
well, and I went in there with the illustrated man who's real life, and they didn't care about me. They're all like, oh, is that the illustrated man? Is that him? So yeah,
That's great. So that's it. They kind of shoved you out of the way, and then that was the end of that. Oh, that's awesome. So this is the first book that I have read that you've written. It will not be the last. So I saved the book to read until this week because I like to have read as close to the date that we talk as possible. Sure. And I couldn't sleep the other night. Well, and once I started reading your book, I didn't sleep either. I just kept going until it was done, something like 2:15 in the morning. So well done. So let's, so I don't know a lot about you other than I read your bio and such, on your website, the way we do. And why don't you tell us, how you came to be writing fiction? Because this is not like you didn't, you had other careers as authors often do. So give us the scoop. How'd you get into this authorship business?
Well, I always knew I was going to be an author. My grandma lived with us when I was growing up, and she used to read to me. And one of the books she read was Little Women. And I'm sure many of you have read that book. And the main character was Jo March. And when I was 5 years old, I thought, well, that book's about me. I thought I was Jo March. Now, never mind that it was written during the Civil War. I couldn't have worked that out, but obviously Jo March was me. So she was a writer. And so I thought, well, I guess that's what I am then. And when I grew up, I just started writing. Even in elementary school, I'd write little stories, and I got a lot of really good feedback from my teachers, and who encouraged me to keep going and told me I was good at it. And thank goodness I was, because I have no other marketable skills. So thank goodness I was able to make a living at it.
I doubt that, but
I was able to, parlay that into a career in journalism. I majored in political science in college, and I worked in DC for a few years after that. And when I came,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it was really, I could say that all of us I worked for a congressman from Minnesota, and then I moved over to a senator's office. And all of us who worked there really appreciated it. Like, oh my God, we're having lunch in the capital of the United States. It was really great. But I did come home and thought, what do I want to do with my life now? And in the back of my mind, I thought, well, I'm a writer. So I just called up our local arts and entertainment paper and said, I don't have anything to show you to prove to you that I'm a good writer. Never been published before, but I'll come work for you for free. And they said, okay. And that was how it started.
Wow.
Free labor, right?
Yeah. So I worked there for free for 6 months and then they hired me on. And that's how I started my career.
So I know you're not in Duluth anymore. You live near the Twin Cities or in the
Yep,
Twin
I live in
Cities
the
now.
Twin Cities.
Yep.
And my
So
home's
you,
in Minneapolis.
and that's where you grew up.
Yeah. Yeah. I live in the Lakes area now, of Minneapolis. And it's great. It's great area to walk the dogs and think about stories. And that's what I do when I don't outline my books. I get that question a lot. Do you outline? No, is the answer. And so sometimes I'll write myself into a corner and I won't know where I'm going to go. And so what I do then is I hitch up one of the dogs because taking two is a disaster. So I just hitch up one and go for a nice long walk. And even if I'm not thinking about it, it kind of, shakes out the cobwebs and I can always get on with things when I get back.
Yeah, it's funny how it doesn't really leave you, but solutions can come to you for how to get out of the corner. When
they come to me in weird ways. Like I'll be in the shower or I'll be, out in the backyard, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, this is what. So
like you give your brain a little break from like thinking directly about the problem.
Yeah.
I think every writer should have that like waterproof thing, that the suction cup tablet that goes in the shower.
Oh,
so that you can...
so many writers I know, they're like, I do my best thinking in the shower. And I don't know what it is, but so many people have said that.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. I will joke sometimes that if you see me like talking in my car, I'm probably not on Bluetooth. I'm like doing dialogue or something. So it's, like a dangerous thing for your brain sometimes. But, so you spent time though in Duluth, right? You lived in Duluth for quite a while.
I lived in Duluth 16 years. And
yeah.
I love it. I love Duluth. I love Lake Superior. Moved back here to take care of family, elderly family. And that was part of the impetus of this book and Stroke of Winter too. If you read that, you'll get some of that in there too.
Is Stroke of Winter your most recent book?
Yes. Yep. That is the one that came out last fall. I'm working on another one that's going to come out. I don't know when it's going to come out, but
they're in order, like from most recent on your website to back.
They are. I have to hop on my website. I have to admit I'm a little bit lazy about the website. And so when you say you read my bio, I'm thinking, I wonder what bio is on there. So I have to be better at that PR stuff.
No. Well, you're not alone. Most of the time we don't do that homework or housekeeping until there's a new book that's, like imminently coming out. And then it's time to go look at all that on the website. So Daughters of the Lake, that's also set on the shores of Lake Superior.
Yeah, the books are all set in and around the Great Lakes. The first one, Tale of Halcyon Crane, came to me after I took a trip to Mackinac Island. I don't know if where is Columbus? Where in Wisconsin is that?
We're about a half hour northeast of Madison. So if you were to drive toward Mackinac Island generally, but you only need a half hour from Madison, that's where we are. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Back when, I did a lot of readings and then the pandemic came and now I'm doing a lot of Zoom, but there's a great bookstore in Oconomowoc that I've been to a bunch of times. Yeah.
Books and Company. Yes.
Books and Company. I love them there.
Yeah,
she's very good to me.
The owner there is lovely. She's very, very kind to authors and collaborative. They do a lot of author events. So
yeah, I did the last one I did there was with Leslie Kagan. I don't know if you know her, but she's a Wisconsin author. Yeah, she's a good pal of mine. And we did an event there and It was a little ridiculous, but it was really fun. We had a great time.
You have to have fun. You have to have fun. Yeah, we're lucky we have some really nice independent bookstores in this area. And I mean, Minneapolis, you have some too, but
Oh, yeah.
we treasure those, right? Because we don't want them to leave. It's like our brew pub here in town. Please stay. We like you. So I was curious to tell us a little bit about, are all your books with the Lake Union with Amazon's imprint, or
I have
tell us
five.
about
5 now with Lake Union. My first 3 were published. The first one was Hyperion, and the second 2 were Henry Holt. And then
sure,
I jumped to Lake Union, and I'll tell you the story of why I did that. And I'm a big supporter of independent bookstores. They built my career, booksellers hand selling my books, and I love them. And I still only go to independents when I do readings, because I have a lot of good relationships with them. And they were a little miffed at me for going with Lake Union because it's owned by Amazon. But when they came calling and my agent and I were talking to them, the executive editor of Lake Union was on the phone trying to, convince me to come over. And my agent said, Wendy is really big in the Great Lakes area. She's really big down south. Southerners love their Gothics, and really big out in the Seattle area and in New York, but we'd like to expand her, into other parts of the country. And the executive editor said, oh, well, we're really interested in keeping Wendy as a regional author. Our region's the world.
that's an odd thing to say in this day and age, right? I mean,
yeah,
it feels
no, but she said our region is the world.
Oh, I see. I see.
Yeah. And
you weren't saying that. They were saying that to you.
She was just kind of being funny, but they did. I'm published now in so many countries and so many different languages. And so that's a big reason why I went with them.
That's fun. So you have your foreign language covers,
I do.
other cover.
Yeah, some are right back there.
Yeah. Do they change the design much when they change?
Yes, they do. They do. Yeah. And it's always neat to see what they do. And a lot of times they change the title. But for this is kind of funny. The Tale of Halcyon Crane was published worldwide when it was published back then, and it was published in China, and they did not change the title. But I since learned that there is an ancient, Chinese myth about a halcyon crane that steps into the water and calms the seas. And I thought, oh my God, my Chinese readers are reading this going, where's the crane?
Oh my gosh. Well, and how would anybody know? I mean, you'd have to have a native, someone familiar with that tale or myth to know.
I know. I thought it was so funny. Somebody told me that at one of my readings, that, did you know that there's this? And I didn't know. So I thought that was kind of funny, and it's funny that the Haunting of Brynn. Oh, I'm going to get this wrong now. The Haunting of Brynn Wilder is going to be in, I just got an Italian, a 2-book Italian deal, and they're going to call The Haunting of Brynn Wilder something like The Keeper of Stolen Dreams or something like that. It's like, okay, all right, you want to call it that? Call it that.
And you don't really have, any control over that anyways. No, you just kind of go with it. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's fun. So you've appreciated working with the Amazon imprint. And I think, just so everybody understands, Amazon has these imprints that are a true publishing company that's very, very separate from like the independent publishing side of things. Like it doesn't have anything to do with KDP or Kindle Direct Publishing or anything like that.
No,
But
it's a publishing company just like any other, but it's owned.
it happens to be owned by Amazon.
Yeah.
And so people get confused by that sometimes. So
Sometimes, but they were when I first started, but now I think that's all dropping away. Just time has passed, and bookstores around, and Lake Union really supports me in independent bookstores. Barnes and Noble, they don't care so much about, but
that would be the case.
yeah,
But they bring
These
so many
really
good
support me in.
books from that imprint every year. So many good books. So
Yeah.
so bravo there, I should say. You have a bunch of questions at the back, of the book. Does anybody want to start off with any other questions? Mary always has questions. You don't have any questions tonight? I'm putting Mary in the hot seat back here.
Let me start out by talking a little bit about how this book came to be.
What was your inspiration for the book?
Well, I had a deadline.
I'm sorry. That's a great inspiration.
People ask me, like, what's your writing process? And I say procrastination and then panic, because I always have deadlines. But this time, though, I had a deadline, and I wasn't feeling very creative because my mom had just died. And I had been by her side throughout, the last year of her life. And so I had this deadline, and it's like, oh man, I've just been going through all this stuff, and I wasn't feeling very creative. So I just started writing about a woman who had just lost her mom. And so everything in the book about the mother's illness and passing really happened, down to the conversations, because I wasn't really in a, like a creative place.
Mhm.
And the subplot with Alice and Jason and Gil, that really happened too. They were my neighbors, the men I based Jason and Gil on. And they really did take in one of their ex-wives who really did have early onset Alzheimer's. And she was maybe all of 65, 66 years old. Lovely, lovely, lovely woman who I got to know so well over the course of a summer. And then we lost her. And when I started writing, the guy's real name is Bert. And I sat with Bert and I said, would you mind if I put that in one of my books, in my next book? I would really like to. And he said, yeah, yes, please put it in. But if anybody asks, ask them to donate to the Alzheimer's Foundation. And so that's what I say all the time in my readings. And when I got the advanced reader copy of this, he didn't want to see it before it. He said, no, God, you're such a good writer. I know you, of course you're going to do it beautifully. But when the advanced reader's copy came out, I gave it to Bert and Andy. Andy, oddly, I was talking about my realtor who got me this house, him. And and they were on vacation in Mexico, and Bert called me bawling, and he said, I'm a crazy man. I'm sitting on a crowded beach, bawling out loud. Thank you so much. I love it. And so, so this book has done really well. And I've received a lot of really heartfelt correspondence from readers. And it's really gratifying because it's the most autobiographical book I've ever written.
And I imagine too, I mean, when you're staring at like that blank page with the cursor, and you like that it had to be therapeutic to start this way. And then maybe when you were writing it, you weren't even sure you were going to use it necessarily.
I knew I had to use it.
Have you-
I had a deadline coming. If I was writing a word, it was going in a book. But it was therapeutic. And I remember I was sitting on my back deck, and I was writing the ending scene, which I won't divulge if any of you haven't read it, but
we sort of have a thing that if you come to Books in the Air, there may be spoilers. So like it's hard to navigate around that. So it's okay. But
when I was writing that scene, I was bawling, and my other neighbor was like, Wendy, are you anything okay? Do you want me to come? What's happening? I'm like, I'm just writing. It's okay. But that was an emotional book. So.
well, you know that you're doing a good job with your writing when, as you're writing those sort of scenes, you can't stop, like the tears, you know, you're putting heart and soul into it. So
I'm a crier anyway. I cry at commercials. You know, there's one dog on a commercial, I'll start bawling. So, but I do cry a lot when I'm writing. I feel like if it doesn't move me, how's it going to move anybody else?
very good. I think that's a very good point. Very good point. I thought that the way you handled the Alzheimer's scenes, like, you know, just the confusion and where they weren't overly correcting Alice and just letting her, you know, think she, you know, had children that needed to be picked up from the bus, even though they were older, of course, that, you know, oh no, someone else is taking care of that today. Because it's the right thing to do, you know, where you don't need to challenge people's ideas. I remember stories that my mom would tell about my grandma, and she was convinced one day that they were just laying around and, you know, sitting around chatting when they should have been out in the field, you know, baling the hay. And it had been, of course, decades and decades and decades since my, you know, grandma had a farm where they'd have to worry about it. So they just said, no, we got it all done. It's all done.
Yeah.
You just don't argue about that.
One day, the woman's real name was Lucy, and she was very agitated about picking the kids up from school. And I was really one of the only people other than Bert who she really felt safe around. I just sort of felt like a mother bear around her, and I wanted to protect her. And so I took her, they were right next door, and she was at my house, and I took her next door and, you know, got her something to drink. And there was a photo of her and all of her adult children, now adults, and grandchildren. And she looked at it and she said, wow, what a beautiful family. Who are they? And so I said, oh, this is, you know, this is John, and this is Elaine, and this is, you know, and oh, they grew up so beautifully.
So and she was right back.
Yeah. But she's like, oh, like that was news to her. Like, oh, they grew up so nice. It's like, yeah, they did.
That's something. Wow. I don't know. I just thought it was just very sensitively done and accurate, and very, very accurate too. So
yeah, it all came from real life.
So have you spent a lot of time in your fake Bayfield?
I do. I go there. I try to go there at least once a year. When I was living in Duluth, we'd go there all the time. But in Minneapolis, it's about a 4.5 hour drive from here. Yeah. So I try to get up there a couple times a year, and it's fun. I love it.
How far is it for us to get to Bayfield? It's like six-ish for us. So, yeah, it's a commitment. This isn't a let's go over there for like the day. It's not how it works, right? So I think so. I'm going to ask people here this too, but I had some different ideas about this. You know, the main character, the guy character. Why can't I think of his name?
Dominic.
Dominic. The illustrated man. So I had some different ideas going at different times as to, you know, what was going on here. But I kept thinking about The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. Have you ever read that?
I'm embarrassed to say no.
No.
I know of it, obviously, but
So at
no,
some
I haven't
point,
read it, and I haven't seen the movie either.
the language is very beautiful in it, but the narrator is deaf. And I think that relative, that there's this omniscient narrator that's watching everything going on. And
I hate that I didn't think of that first.
Yes, and actually,
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what year that came out, whether you would have, beaten him to the punch on that one.
Dang it.
But it was fun. It was fun, like I knew there was something, going on here. And clearly he was in some interesting places at interesting times when things were happening. Did you guys have? You didn't write what? Come on, really?
No, I knew something.
Okay, some people say they did. Some people.
Something was off.
Okay, Heather says she knew something was off, but didn't know exactly what. I thought it was intriguing, and I had a thought I didn't go all the way there to who's the older lady who died over the winter, because I wasn't quite sure about like the time slip type thing.
Yeah.
And so that was incredible plotting. And you say you don't outline, which that's so great that you can do that.
It's weird. It's weird how it works out. I'll just be going along, and you guys, have seen me, I'm a pretty casual person. I just, and so I'm just writing along, and then something will just occur to me, and I'll think, oh, awesome. And I'll write that down, not really even comprehending that, 40 pages earlier, I'd set that up perfectly. And then, when I read it over, it's like, oh yeah, that really makes sense right there. And so it's not like I'm consciously connecting all those dots. Somehow they just connect though.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense too. It's sort of a subconscious thing in a way.
It's a total subconscious thing. And I don't want to sound too woo-woo about it, but it really is, because I don't, like, people say, oh, how many drafts do you write? One. One. I write it, first page, last page, turn it in. And
there's a whole bunch of writers out there that are going to just hate you for that.
I know. I never say that when I'm reading with I do a lot of events with other writers.
Yeah.
I never say that because I just go forward, and somehow it all works out, and I never have to go back and put something in or take something out. It just always seems to work out somehow.
Well, and I think we talk about, I'm doing a little series. Oh, go ahead. Does somebody have a question?
Go ahead. Did you know the ending and you wrote into it, or did it all just evolve and you're like, oh, that's how it is?
Did you hear her?
Like, do I know the ending?
Yeah. Did you know the ending and write to it?
No.
So as you move along through your writing, you're almost as surprised as the reader as to where you're going.
And it really goes like that. Like, I also feel that if I'm surprised, then you all will be surprised. But I'll tell you a story about one time when I was writing The End of Temperance Dare, which is my scariest book. If you like scary, or if you don't like scary, Temperance is the scariest. But there's something in there that I always wanted to put in a book. And when I was starting it, I thought, oh, I'm going to put that in. I'm going to put it in. And I was writing it, and I thought, nobody's going to see this coming. This is awesome. And I can't tell you how many readers said, oh yeah, I saw that coming a mile away. So if I know, you're going to know. And so I learned my lesson, and I don't do that anymore.
Well, I mean, clearly your writing methodology works. So I'm curious how long, like, do you tend to, like, how long does it take you to write a book? And are you completely immersed in it, during that time? Like, do you not take breaks? You just, write straight through for a couple months or less, or how does it work for you?
Well, for The Haunting of Brynn Wilder, I wrote this book in about 6 weeks. And I don't want to do that again, but it really worked out with that one. I think I just love this book. I'm so glad you're reading it. So grateful that you are. But with others, I try to leave myself like my new book is due November 1, and I'm starting it now. And so I'm giving myself some time, and so I don't have to panic, and I can, get into it and have a more leisurely pace. But when I get into it, I write at least 1,000 words a day when I'm writing, because I feel like I don't want to just write a few paragraphs here and then a few paragraphs there. I feel like if you write a longer amount, it's going to flow better.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. My best writing has been when I was at a writing residency up in Door County. And then I had this feeling of responsibility that I've been given this free time to write, with not having to pay for your lodging or anything. And I didn't do any editing. I just wrote straight through, and it's really solid stuff, right? And I think that when you get interrupted and maybe it's 3-4 days and a week, 2 weeks, you come back to it, and it takes so long to get back into the flow.
Yeah. So when I'm writing, I try to write every day, and at least 1,000 words or at least a chapter, and then I try to leave a little hook at the end of every chapter, not only to get the reader to turn the next page, but to get me like, oh yeah, I want to address that now,
That makes sense a lot. Do you go back and read through what you wrote the day before and do any editing? Yeah. And then that's like your
back. Yep. I read through what I wrote the day before. I don't usually edit, maybe a word here and a word there. But I've never once taken out a paragraph. I've never once thought, oh, I went down a wrong road, I've got to take all that out. I find a way to just work it out. And that makes it fun, and it makes it interesting for me and for you, I hope.
Well, yeah, clearly it did. I love this book. So does your agent, do you have an editorial agent? Does your agent read your things before they go? I mean, if you're under contract for something, your agent doesn't really need to do a whole lot with it, or does he or she?
She is my first reader.
Okay.
And during my first few books, I got a message. It's not from one of you guys, is it? Somebody just said, "Hey, how's my favorite author?" It's like, you guys didn't.
You did it. That would be really funny if we started texting you.
I know. That's weird. But yeah, she does. She does, read it. My first few books, we really went back and forth. And she'd suggest some things, and I'd tweak some things. But now, for the last 5 books, she reads it. She's, and then she sends it on.
So have you had the same editor at Lake Union since your first book with them? So you've had a nice relationship with that person.
Yeah, she's great. She's great. And it's gotten to the point now with them that, I mean, it's funny because my first book, the first manuscript I wrote didn't sell. The second one didn't sell. The third one was Halcyon Crane, and that sold, but it took a year for that book to sell. Now, I just got back from a month in Italy. And when I was going to go to Italy, my agent went to my editor and said, "Hey, Wendy's going to Italy for a month. She'd like to set a book there." And my publisher said, "Oh, great," and sent me a contract. I didn't even have to. didn't have to
You
do
know,
it.
you have a good relationship with your publisher when.
Yeah. So I'm grateful for that.
So did you work on a book set in Italy while you were in Italy?
Well, when so my editor called me and said, okay, so this Italy book, what do you think it's going to be about? And I, on the phone, out of thin air, said, I think it's going to be about a woman who finds, she does some ancestry research and finds that she comes from a long line of witches in Italy. And
That's
she
my
goes
kind of book.
over to discover, and so I'm on the plane going over there thinking, gosh, I hope they have a tradition of witches in Italy.
They do now.
But when I was over there, I stayed primarily in a little town that my friend bought a house in, and said, hey, Wendy, you want to come over? I'm like, yeah. So I was sitting there, and kind of the word went around. It's a small medieval village, and the word went around that there's an author in town. And so people would come up, and I was talking to a server in this restaurant in a castle one night, and but nobody knew what I was writing about. They just knew American author in town. And so this guy sat down with me and said, oh, so see that other village over there? You can just see it over across the horizon. I said, yeah. He said, yeah, it's just like this, but them only witches. Like, what? And they have,
You took your rental car and
I
you
know. Hold that thought. But what I found out was that town has a festival of the witch on my birthday every year. And I know, I looking at the gal, it's like, I know, that's what I thought too. What they do is they recreate an old ritual that everybody used to do over in Italy. That was back in the day when, if your child would get sick, obviously it's the work of a witch. So what you'd have to do, the mother would take some of the child's clothes and start walking through the town, and then other women would join, and they'd get to the square, burn the clothes, spells over, child's going to recover. And they recreate that every year on my birthday. So I'm going to go over next year for that. And
holy shit. Is this in Tuscany?
No, it's in Abruzzo.
Okay.
And yeah, but Tuscany too. You go and you see all these old-fashioned brooms on people's above people's doors, the old with straw.
Right.
And I thought, oh, isn't that a quaint little decoration? It's not a quaint little decoration. What that is to ward off witches, because if they're going to come into your house at night and that's there, that will distract them, because they have to count all the little, whatever they're called, the little straws, strands, bristles. Yeah. And they'll be there counting, and then the sun will come up and they'll have to go. And everybody's got those. And so it's like, and I told that to my agent. I said, I just pulled that out of thin air, and there's so much of it over there. And she says, Wendy, your thin air is different than other people's thin air.
Yeah, I think maybe.
So that's what the book's going to be about. And and here's the other really freaky thing too. So I told you my friend owns this house, and he and his wife were there for a time. And a guy that he knew from Duluth was also in Europe with his girlfriend, who's German. So we all got together for lunch. Now, this guy didn't know what I was writing about either, but he knew I was an author and I write about, Gothic stuff. And he says to me at the lunch table, Wendy, you might be interested to know that Violet here grew up in a long line of witches. her mother, grandmother, great grandmother, all witches. And my friend Rod just put his head down on the table and just went, what is her life all about? And so I spent the day talking to Violet about what it was like. And she told me a lot of great stories. And she gave me a really good tip that I'm going to use. She said, you should start every chapter with a little recipe. And one of her favorite recipes is, she said, you know, the first daisies that grow in the spring, they're very strong because they have to push their way out of the snow, and they're the strongest daisies. What she does is she takes those and cuts up the flowers and puts them in her family's salt shaker, so that when they're seasoning their food, they're seasoning strength into her family.
Oh, wow.
I know, isn't that cool? And so
Very
she
interesting.
said you should start every chapter with one of those. And I'm going to do that. I think that's a great idea. I would never have thought of that. So
That's so fun. Okay, so I'm so in. I will be a beta reader. I will be an ARC reader, reviewer, whatever you need.
okay. Yeah, I'm psyched. I'm just really excited. Yeah.
You probably don't use beta readers much, though. You send it straight off. You're
I said
done. You're
I
done.
don't use beta readers, but I'll send you an ARC.
All right. All right. No, that's delightful stuff. But isn't it funny how there's that synergy of thought and things that sort of, come together that way? And it doesn't always happen, but when you hear stories like this, you're like, okay, clearly this story was meant to be written this way. So,
And I take it as an affirmation that I'm on the right track.
Yep.
Things don't always have to be a struggle. Yes, a lot of things in life, you got to work hard for them. I certainly worked hard to get here, but it doesn't have to be a long slog through hell. It can be fun.
No, and writing should be fun. I mean, there's a lot of writing that isn't fun. I mean, I think that, corporate writing is really boring. And there's a lot of writing that is done out there in the world that is necessary writing, technical writing. There's all kinds of stuff that isn't fun. But if you're going to be the creator of worlds with fiction, you need to love the world you're inhabiting and really enjoy it. And clearly that comes through in the stories that you're writing. So,
well, and I know so many writers who really do struggle with it and they agonize over it. And it's like, why are you doing it, guys? This is the most fun I've ever had. I love it. And I'm so grateful every single day that I get to spend my life doing it.
Yeah, I think the creation of story is so much fun. Like there's parts of the publishing business that aren't fun, right? But
the creation is not fun. The business is not. But
if you can avoid that.
Yeah. And people lose publishers all the time. They, for whatever reason, you move on. And before I got to Lake Union, I was complaining to my agent. I just said, I just want one constant. I want one home. That's it. And she said, that's what you got me for. So, it's us against the world. And wherever I land, I'm going to stay with Lake Union. But I do have another book that is going to be ready about the same time as the new one, The Witches. That is the first manuscript I ever wrote. And it remains my agent's favorite. And we want to put it back out there. Now that I've had a measure of success, before when I was an unknown trying to get my first deal, publishers didn't really know what to do with it. But now that's a pet project for both me and my agent. So I'm not sure if we're going to go with Lake Union with that or if we're going to take it elsewhere, but that's
the Gothic in nature. as well?
It is, it's a little more magical.
Okay.
Than any of
Lake
my,
Union, is Lake Union really just predominantly Gothic, or do they have a little wiggle room in there?
no, they have a lot of wiggle room. They do women's fiction.
Right.
There's like a straight mystery arm of Amazon Publishing, that's Thomas and Mercer. And
Right.
I've got friends who are published by them. And
I
so
forget, Colleen Hoover is with one of the imprints too.
yeah,
Is she
I
with,
think
like,
she's with mine. I think she's with Lake Union. I'm not sure.
And I
I
think
haven't
Robert,
looked at-
Robert Dugoni is with one of the Amazon publishers too, and it might be Thomas and Mercer.
that would make sense
Jeff
for him.
Lowry is with Thomas and Mercer now too. So
So we'll see. So you don't necessarily have to give them right of first refusal or anything.
I don't know. That's up to, that's the business.
That's your agent's business.
That's not it's not my business. Whatever works out, works out.
That's so fun. Okay, so you need to just get writing this like witches book, because now I'm super intrigued and want to read this book.
I know.
So you need
Everybody's
to,
all crazy when I say, "Oh, witches." They're like, "Oh," and so I'm psyched about it. What I'm doing right now is looking up recipes,
Mhm.
but I feel like I want to look up because I know readers will catch this. I have to look up Italian recipe because
yeah,
people go, "Oh, they don't have that flour in Central Italy." So I'm gonna have
Did
to.
you keep Violet's contact information and you can
Yeah.
ask her?
Yes, I did. And so she's gonna be my my witch whisperer.
your expert consultant or
Yeah.
something. I don't know.
I think I'm gonna name my main character Violet. I love it. Maybe they'll all be named for flowers and plants, and because that's what
That'd be fun.
yeah.
That'd be very. So your deadline to have that into Lake Union is November 1.
Yeah.
The publication then next year.
Yeah, probably. They like to put mine out in the fall. And I like that. That I used to be in a cycle where my books would come out in the winter, and I'm like, Midwest. Don't send me on a book tour in the middle of a Midwest January. So
I was just talking to another author about that and like doing their marketing, and it's an indie pub author. And she's like, "Oh, forget it. Let's do April." She's like, "I just don't want to drive around and, feel like I need to do like, bookstore, libraries, the whole thing." Yeah.
well, yeah, that's what I do when books come out. I drive around the Great Lakes, and then I'll go out east and I'll go down south to my bookstores that I march around to, and up to Seattle.
Well, the down south part's fine in the middle of winter, but forget that.
Although I did fly into Atlanta when the city shut down. This was about 6-7 years ago. They got 2 inches of snow, and I was like, "Oh, 2 inches of snow, who cares?" Yeah, the whole city shut. My whole book tour was canceled. So
they don't know what to do with it, and they don't have snow removal equipment.
No.
They have to wait for it to melt. So
yeah, it was quite the thing.
Pete's got a question.
Well, why do you impose deadlines on yourself? Why don't you just do it and hand it in when it's done?
Oh, he's asking about your deadlines. Well, why do you impose deadlines? So you have a firm deadline with your publisher for November 1.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Clearly, you could hand it in early.
Oh, I could hand it in early. That's never happened in the history of me, but
He's asking about is it more stress to write to the deadline? I mean, you're under contract though for this book already.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you sign a contract and it's okay, it's due on this day.
Yeah.
And that's how it's been now for the past 5, now 6 books.
Which I think, for me, it is helpful, even if I'm independently publishing, it's helpful for me to have a mental deadline, because it's easy to move that marker,
I need a deadline or I will just procrastinate. And I really need a deadline, very deadline driven. And it comes from being a journalist my whole career. You got to get it in. So
right on deadline. You're like, oh, I've got an hour for this story. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
I'll bang it out.
Exactly. Does that make sense? Yeah. I mean, otherwise, I mean, if you were writing, like, say the very first book you ever wrote, like you weren't on deadline then because
No.
you were starting out. So you had the freedom to take as long as you needed to take with it.
Yeah, and it took a while. It took like a year for me to write that. And then when she was trying to sell, or it took me about a year to write the first manuscript. And when my agent was trying to sell that, I wrote the next one. And when she was trying to sell that, I wrote Halcyon Crane. So, and that's what I tell aspiring authors. Don't give up.
Right.
If your first manuscript doesn't sell, think of something else. It's fiction. You're making it all up. It's not the only story out there. Just think of something else. Just write something else. And even good friends of mine who are, I know a lot of writers just because that's my business. And people get discouraged, if their books don't sell or it's like, no, just write something else, be confident and love what you're doing and just write it.
It can take a long time to find the right spot to land with stories.
Very much.
And that can be very, very different paths these days. You could do independent publishing, but to do independent publishing well takes a different skill set and different types of discipline.
It takes a lot of sales savvy.
It does.
I do not have.
Well, and that part is typically not the fun part, right? For authors. So are you familiar with the children's author, Kate DiCamillo?
Yes.
She's a Minnesota girl. And she's so fun. And she'll just talk about, all the books that she'd written that didn't make it anywhere. And I just did and of course she's incredibly well known now. And I just did a writing workshop with middle schoolers.
Oh.
And I mentioned Kate DiCamillo, like I was trying to get a feel for what examples I should use it was a four session thing, one a week for 4 weeks. And they all had read Kate DiCamillo, and I got that conversation got going, and they were like, no, this book by hers is the best. No, this book. And I had a mix of boys and girls in the little workshop. And it was so adorable, but I kept thinking back. I want to say it took her 7 years to get her first book out there. And,
it's hard. It's the lead up to it is hard. And I'm, a confident person anyway. And I just knew, from the time I was very small that I was going to be an author. I just knew it. And so I just kept trying because I knew it was going to happen. I just had to find the right thing. And, but it's hard. Everybody's looking for a reason to say no.
Yeah. And it's hitting the timing right. It's a business. You have to hit all the right pieces right. The right editor at the right publishing house, being represented by the right agent, just to hit it right.
Yeah.
Do you have to do heavy editing, do you think, on your first book? Or, did you go back to it? Or was it just that it just wasn't the right time and place then? And then, I was just curious.
It was, have you read the book or seen the movie Chocolat?
Yes.
So if you all haven't, it's about it's the strange little tale about a woman who opens a chocolate shop in a small town. And she gives people certain chocolates that they need to help them with their problems in their lives. And it's a magical thing. It's like that. It's like magical realism, they call it. Right. And so
that's a lovely story.
And this is a beautiful story that I don't want to talk too much about, but I love it. And it's magical and beautiful and all that stuff. But when I this was 12 years ago now, and publishers didn't really know what to do with it. And
I think more magical realism out now. I mean, there always was, Isabel Allende and, Gabriel Garcia Marquez,
yeah,
and,
those were my influences. Love in the Time of Cholera is still one of my favorite books of all time. I loved it so much. And but I was brand new. Nobody knew who I was, whether I could, but now is the right time for that. And I am going back through it. Because we want it to be bulletproof before it goes
Right.
out. And I've
That
learned
makes sense.
stuff after
Yeah.
writing, 8, 9 novels now. I've learned a thing or two.
Just
So,
just a thing or two, not like 5 or 10 or 15. Does anybody else have questions? No?
Are you happy with Amazon? Are you with Amazon?
Are you happy with your imprint with Lake Union at Amazon?
I love them. They're wonderful. They're fun people to work with, really nice people, really supportive. When my second book with them, Daughters of the Lake, hit 100,000 copies, I got a big, every time you hit sales milestones, there's, big to-dos. It's, and
As the city.
yeah. And they're good to me. They have, my book covers, larger than life hanging on the wall in the mothership in Seattle. And it's cool. They're supportive.
That's incredibly cool, isn't it? To walk in and go,
Yeah.
"Oh, my brother."
Yeah. So it's nice. It's they're nice people to work with.
Good.
You're out of, where are they out of?
Well, it's Amazon headquarters. They're in Seattle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously, that's like where all the staff offices are, right? Seattle.
Yeah, that's where all that's the home
Oh,
office.
makes sense.
You can walk into their office, sit down one time.
She can. She is asking if you can just walk into the office and sit down and talk to them. I mean,
I can.
So, but like, I can't.
Yeah.
They'll be like wondering what the heck this person is asking,
You know what though? The publishing house is based there, and my executive editor works out of there. But my editor works at home. She lives in California. So
yeah, so they do a lot of remote office type stuff. Yeah, that makes sense. So I have one. So we didn't do a deep dive in your book. We just all really enjoyed it. But so I have a question about how you chose the place names to replace, the real names of the places. And why did you not use the real names of the town and the, Madeline Island and that? Like,
I get that question a lot, and I don't really have a good answer, except for when I was writing Halcyon Crane, I was setting it on Mackinac Island, but it was going to be about a longtime island family, and there were some ugly stuff that happened. And so I didn't want to offend any real, and I didn't want to inadvertently get something right so that people would say, oh, those are the Johnsons she's talking about, so I just, but everybody knows that's Mackinac Island. Everybody knows that Wharton is Bayfield. So
it makes a lot of sense, because the last thing you want is somebody being mad at you or suing you.
I don't want to offend anybody. I just want to, I don't want to offend. And like with Wharton, everybody there knows that I love Bayfield, and I'm, it's a love letter to that area. So,
I think so. Yeah, very much so.
And again, another one of those things that I didn't know before I started sending books there. That's like the most haunted town in Wisconsin. Every
Yeah,
place is haunted
I
there.
didn't know that. I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Oh, Grunke's Inn. Oh, that's where I got the idea for the Haunting of Brynn Wilder. Was asked to speak at the high school. So I did that. And then it was around lunchtime and I thought I'm going to go have lunch at Grunke's. And I sat there and I had my computer open and the waitress came over and said, "Are you Wendy Webb?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah, I am." And she's like, "Gary, come on over here, Wendy Webb." And so the guy comes out from the kitchen and she says, "Tell her about all the ghosts in here." And the cook goes, "Every day I look up and one of them's floating across the room." I'm like, "What?"
Are they here now?
Yeah, and then they took me upstairs and showed me, you can rent rooms there, which I did then. I thought I'm going to spend the night. And I did. And that's how I got the whole idea for to set the book there.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was just curious what, the reason was, but that makes a lot of sense to not like ruffle feathers that you don't
Yeah,
have.
I just want to make
Now
people
I want it. Now I need to go. I have never, being someone from Wisconsin, I've never been in Bayfield.
Oh, for goodness sake. If you love Door County, you'll love Bayfield.
Okay, I am the odd person out here. I need to go to Bayfield. So any more last question?
Well, did you know that in like the 1500s was a huge Indian battle with Indians on Madeline Island?
Oh.
And the Indians that came from way out east, and everybody in that island was completely wiped out. And then for years and years, the Indians didn't want to be in that island because of all the ghosts.
Oh, so Madeline Island's haunted. Could you hear most of what he said, or should I repeat it?
I heard some. Can you?
So he's saying that apparently the Madeline Island was the site of a very big battle between different tribes of Indians, and that the local tribes,
The locals got wiped out.
the locals got wiped out. So in the ensuing centuries, decades since, they wouldn't want to go out there because of the ghosts of what ancestors ghosts. Yeah.
Oh,
Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
Oh, now we started it.
Now
we
I'll have to go check that out next time.
So many stories, so little time, right? Well, it's been so much fun to meet you, get to know you a little bit. Thanks for hanging out with us for an hour, a little more than an hour. So maybe someday we'll get to meet you in person at an event somewhere as authors and stuff.
Yeah. That would be wonderful. And I just want to say thank you so much for reading Brynn Wilder. It really it just touches me to do book clubs like this, and people have read, it still astonishes me that people other than my family are
reading your book.
So
just a few 100,000 other people. So, no, delightful. You tell, all like, I don't know how many million, no, whatever, but you tell a delightful story. So, I cannot, for one, I'm sure there's other people here cannot wait to read the next book too, but I've got a whole list here of your other ones that I haven't read yet. So maybe I'll stay busy until the new one's out next year here. So
I recommend if the next one, Daughters of the Lake. I think you'll like, if you like Haunting of Brynn, you'll like Daughters of the Lake. That's where the whole Wharton thing came to be. And it's a good one.
I look forward to it. So thank you so much. We appreciate your time in doing this.
Thank you.
Now you gotta
so much.
We'll get writing, right?
I'll
Shortly, right?
writing.
Couple weeks, or is that when you start? So
Yes. Bye.
Thanks. Take care. Great. Bye-bye.